PCs can be big, bulky, and a hassle to move around. Trust me, I know. But what if I told you there's something out there that can actually be lightweight, powerful, and fit in the palm of your hand? Today, I want to introduce you guys to the Xulu XR1. Xulu approached me earlier this month asking if I wanted to take a look at one of their early prototypes for their XR1. Of course, I said yes. So obviously, Xulu did send me this unit for review, so keep that in mind. Just a quick little disclaimer before we get into the rest of the video. The XR1 has been in development for a few years now, and it's going to be a Kickstarter-backed project. So you can't buy this off the shelf from a retail store. You'll have to end up backing it on Kickstarter if you're interested in the XR1 after watching this review. So with that said, let's get into the specs of the multiple models of the XR1. There are 3 models in total of the XR1, the Lite, Pro, and Max. I'm going to go over the specifications of the Max before we get into the specifications of the Lite and the Pro. The specifications for the XR1 Max that I have here is the AMD Ryzen 7 5800U, which turbos to 4.4 GHz and is an 8-core processor with 16 threads. It also has AMD Radeon RX Vega 8 graphics, which is clocked at 2000 MHz. There are 2 options for the XR1 Max when selecting the hardware. There is option 1, which is dual 16GB RAM sticks for a total of 32 GB with a 1TB SSD. And there's a second option with dual 32GB sticks of RAMs for a total of 64 GB with a 2TB SSD. The Pro variant of the XR1 has an AMD Ryzen 5 5600U, which turbos to 4.2 GHz and is a 6-core, 12-thread CPU. It is also equipped with AMD Radeon RX Vega 7 graphics, clocked at 1800 MHz. Just like the Max, the Pro also has 2 hardware options as you can choose from. The option 1 is a dual 8GB RAM configuration for a total of 16 GB with a 500GB SSD, or the second option is dual 16GB RAM sticks for a total of 32 GB with a 1TB SSD. As for the Lite variant of the XR1, it is a AMD Ryzen 3 5300U, which turbos to 3.8 GHz, is 4 cores, and has 8 threads. It's also equipped with AMD Radeon RX Vega 6 graphics, clocked at 1500 MHz. Just like the Pro and the Max, there's 2 hardware configurations you can choose from. Option 1 is dual 4GB RAM sticks for a total of 8GB with a 500GB SSD. The second option is dual 8GB RAM sticks for a total of 16 with a 500GB SSD. With the specifications out of the way, we're going to get into an unboxing of the XR1 Max that was sent to me for review. I actually originally asked them to send me a Pro of the XR1, but they sent me the Max instead, which was still pretty cool because this is the top of the line XR1 that you can get from Xulu at the moment. So we flip the package over to the side here. We have some highlighted features here on the side of the box. We have the ability to use 3 displays on this guy. So you can use HDMI, the 2 HDMIs, and then 1 USB-C to connect 3 displays at the same time on this guy here. We also have 7 USB ports. We have the mini OLED display that is on the front of the XR1 Max, which is really cool. It's one of my favorite features about this thing, and I think it separates the XR1 from a lot of the other mini PCs, is it's got the time and date, the fan speed, as well as the temperatures of the APU inside of the XR1's chassis and how hot things are getting inside. We also have Wi-Fi 6E, the ability to output 4K Ultra HD, and it is installed with Windows 11 Pro, and then we have the ability to install Linux on it as well. So we flip it over, we get a little bit more detailed features about the XR1 Max. Basically all of the specifications that we mentioned before in the breakdowns between the difference of models between the Lite, Pro, and Max. But we do have the ability to upgrade our RAM to 64 GB, and it is user replaceable. It is a bit difficult. I will get into that in a bit, but we have Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.2 as well. We have Gigabit Ethernet, and we have the ability to upgrade our storage to 2 TB. Mine currently has the 1TB SSD, so I could upgrade this guy in the future if I wanted to. We also have a built-in headphone and microphone jack on the front panel of the XR1. We also have the dual microphones that are built into the XR1, so you don't need to have a built-in microphone for the XR1 if you are just looking to do conference calls and maybe just chat online with your friends using Discord. You could use the built-in microphones. We're going to test that. We'll see how good they are. I have no idea how good they are. We also have the power supply rating of 19 volts DC, 3.42 amps, and it is 100 to 240 volts AC. So we do have a universal power supply in here. So they gave me the 32GB RAM and 1TB SSD version of the Max. So that is option 1 that you saw earlier. And they didn't send me option 2. So we're going to quickly just slide the cover off here, and then we're going to get into unboxing the XR1. So this is the travel case that you can get. It's a hard shell travel case. This is an add-on on Kickstarter if you wanted to get the travel case. I do highly recommend it if you do plan on moving the computer around. If you don't really plan on moving the computer around, then this is probably not necessary, but I've already moved this computer around quite a bit in my testing, so the travel cases actually come in quite handy here. So I'm just going to unzip it here, and we're going to have a look at what's inside of the travel case. So right front and center, we have the Xulu XR1. Now, the color that I requested was the Mandarin orange color, and I really dig the color combination of the orange and black. I really like this thing a lot. I really like the design of it. I think they did a great job with the design. So right front and center, if we have a look at the front of this Xulu XR1, we have the mini OLED display that has the time as well as the fan speed and the APU's temperature. We have the dual microphones built in here and here. So those are stereo microphones. We do have an LED for like disc read activity. We have one USB 3, one USB 2. We have the headphone microphone combination jack as well as the USB-C. I believe these are USB 3.1 Gen 2 ports, the USB 3 ports as well as the C. We have the barrel connector, and yes, unfortunately it is a barrel connector. We'll get into the power supply in a second. We do have our Ethernet port. We have 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, and we have 2 USB 3 ports as well as 2 USB 2 ports on the back. And on the top, we have the intake mesh grill right here, which is really cool. It's kind of a powder coated feel, as well as the chassis itself is kind of a anodized magnesium aluminum, kind of like the MacBook Pro, I guess. And we have our power button, a really actually nice feeling power button. And on the sides of the Xulu XR1, these bars actually illuminate white. So these actually glow when you turn it on, and it's on both sides. And that is pretty much just a quick little rundown of the XR1. There is 2 mounts on the back here that are threaded, so you could probably actually mount this on the back of a display if you really wanted to. I don't know if the bracket is an add-on that you can buy. I'm not too sure about that. But that is the Xulu XR1 in a quick nutshell here. So we're just going to quickly set that guy off to the side for now. And we'll have a look at the power supply that comes for the XR1. So they do have a kind of a Velcro cable tie here. And it is unfortunately a barrel connector for the XR1, which I really would like to see a USB-C power supply instead of the barrel connector, because barrel connectors are kind of fragile after a while of taking in and out. It can break quite easily. So that is something I would like to see in the future that's changed for maybe the XR2. And the foam on the inside of the travel case is about 1 inch thick, so it definitely could take quite a beating for traveling. So this is actually something that I really do recommend if you travel. And then on the top here, we have a zippered pouch here that you can actually keep cables, maybe USB dongles for your mouse. That's what I do. I keep my USB dongle inside here for my mouse, as well as my keyboard. And inside here, we do have some packaging. So we do have some goodies in a bag, and we'll get to that in a second. They did include an HDMI cable, and then we're just gonna toss the case off to the side here for now. But we do have what looks like a sticker in here. So we'll actually get these out. So what we got here. So we do have a Xulu sticker that is included in the box, which is really cool. And then we do have a little pamphlet here that says Xulu XR1, the smallest Ryzen-based PC in the world. And it's got a nice graphic of the XR1 there. And when we open it up, we do have kind of these, I think these are dust filters that are adhesive. So I think what you do is you take these guys off and you stick them on either the outside or the inside. I would probably do it on the inside personally, but you can stick them on here like so, and it acts as kind of a dust protector for the intake and the outtake of the XR1. So we have this one. It can also go on the top like so, but I recommend taking these panels off and then sticking them on the inside instead of the outside. We also have a quick start manual for the XR1 Max. So if you aren't really familiar with computers, there's a breakdown of everything inside there that we talked about earlier. Moving on, we do have this little pamphlet that has all the different colors, and the different color options that we have here is Obsidian Black, Storm White, Battleship Gray, Fire Engine Red, and the Mandarin Orange that I have here. We also have Lumi Green and Cobalt Blue, and we do have a breakdown of the difference between the Max, Pro, and Lite, very similar to the one that I showed you earlier, as well as some of the highlighted features just like on the outside of the case. And we do have the dimensions of the XR1, so if you are interested in the dimensions of the XR1. And the dimensions are 3.5 inches across by 3.8 inches deep and 2.5 inches tall. We're gonna toss that off to the side and we're gonna have a look at the XR1. So I'm gonna quickly just take this apart. Here I have my iFixit screwdriver kit here, and the bit that I believe is needed for disassembly of the XR1 is going to be a hex bit. So it is a 1.5 hex bit, in case you are curious to see what bit you need to take the XR1 apart or upgrade it. Now this computer itself is really, I would say, not user-friendly for upgrading, and I've already taken this apart once, and it took me about 2 hours to reassemble again, because there are so many ribbon cables on the inside of the XR1 that if you aren't experienced with computers and taking things apart, especially cell phones, if you have a lot of experience with taking cell phones apart, then this is probably pretty easy for you because of the ribbon cables that need to be taken out in order to upgrade things. So originally I had the XR1 from Xulu with their SSDs that came from the factory, and I actually had to replace the SSD inside of the XR1 because it died. And the brand of the XR1's SSD was called HERK, H-E-R-K, and I could not find any kind of reference to it online. So take that as you will. They've told me that they will be replacing the HERK drives with Samsung and Kingston drives, which is much better than the no-name brand HERK drive that was in here. So I did end up having to take this apart and replace it myself to finish this review, because it was either that or send it back to Hong Kong, where Xulu is based out of, and that would have taken several weeks, and I wouldn't have gotten this review done in time for the launch of the Kickstarter. So we're just going to quickly take the top panel off, as well as the back panel. So with the top off, you can see the exposed heatsink fan, which is kind of a laptop turbine fan. It's actually does a really good job of cooling things, and we'll get into the performance of the XR1 after we do the unboxing. So for this guy here, it just shoves forward like that. It unlocks. So you push it from the back, and then it slides out. The entire chassis just slides out like so. And that is pretty much the entire chassis for the XR1. It's very easy to take apart. It's very easy to repaste it, so you don't really need to take it much apart. You just got to take the screws off, take the heatsink off, repaste it, throw it back on. No big deal. That's pretty easy. But on the bottom here, this is where things get a bit rough. This is where the Wi-Fi card is, as well as the panels for the OLED right here. So this is all the LEDs and the microphones. And the OLED is actually plugged in here, sorry. This is the connector for the OLED is in there. And then these guys on the bottom are the two LEDs on the left and right, and the dual microphones here. So underneath this guy here, I'm not going to take it apart because that requires me to take out the ribbon cables here on all four sides. It's very, very difficult to take it apart. And the SSD is up underneath on the back. And if you want to replace the RAM, you have to take the front motherboard apart. So it's kind of like a sandwich. These two motherboards, so one goes here and then one goes over here. And then those motherboards are actually connected to each other via these ribbon cables on the side. There's 4 of them here. These ribbon cables are really fragile. So if you break them or you break the slot that's in them, that's it. The computer's toast. So be careful when upgrading it. That is pretty much the XR1 in a nutshell though. So we're going to assemble this bad boy. We're going to get into some gaming benchmarks as well as some synthetic benchmarks. And we're going to see how the Xulu XR1 performs. With the Xulu XR1 now plugged in and booted up, we are now going to have a look at the synthetic benchmarks that I recorded for the XR1. Before we get into that though, I just wanted to point out that the OLED screen that I've mentioned several times at this point is now up and running, and you can have a look at what it looks like while the XR1 is running. So let's get into the synthetic benchmark. So the first synthetic benchmark that I took was going to be CineBench R23, and the CPU multi-core score was 9,255 points, and the CPU single-core score was 1,433 points. And the closest comparable CPU that we got in terms of our benchmarking results was the Core i7-1165G7, and we are going to move on to the next synthetic benchmark that I took, which was GeekBench. I took a bunch of GeekBench scores, so if we zoom in on the scores. So the Xulu XR1 scored 1,985 on the single core score, and we got 8,148 points on the multi-core score for the Xulu XR1 on GeekBench. And I did end up recording the OpenCL score as well as the Vulkan scores in GeekBench. So our OpenCL score was 16,786 for OpenCL. And as for the Vulkan score on the GeekBench score, we got 15,842 for the Vulkan score. So moving on to 3D Mark, we recorded a bunch of 3D Mark runs. So first is going to be TimeSpy, and we got a run of 1,474 points on the TimeSpy score. Our graphics score was 1,307, and our CPU score was 5,417. We got rather close to the world record here of 1,543 with our score of 1,474. So not a bad run for TimeSpy there. As for the next test for 3D Mark, we did a wildlife run as well, and we got 7,970 points for the wildlife run. For whatever reason, it didn't populate the average or the best score for the 5800U. But moving on to the last one that we did for 3D Mark that is supported on the 5800U, a lot of them require ray tracing. So this guide here doesn't have any ray tracing whatsoever. So we just had to run the tests that were available on 3D Mark with the 5800U. So Night Raid is the last one, and we got a pretty decent showing from the XR1 in terms of the Night Raid score. We got very close to the world record of 14,310 with our score of 14,219. The graphics score was 15,895 and the CPU score was 8,903. So those are all the synthetic benchmarks that I ran for the XR1. We're going to get into the gaming benchmarks for the XR1, and we have a lot of gaming benchmarks to go through. We have Apex Legends, we're going to try and run that, Overwatch, Valorant, CSGO, Doom Eternal, we're also going to try and run Horizon Zero Dawn, Rocket League. We're going to do the new and very popular BattleBit Remastered as well on the XR1 to see how that runs on the integrated graphics for the Xulu XR1. So let's get into the gaming benchmarks now on the XR1. To start off the gaming benchmarks for the Xulu XR1, we're going to start with Apex Legends. Now I ran Apex at 768p on the lowest preset or the lowest settings possible, as well as using the dynamic scaling feature that's built into the video options, and the target I selected was 60 frames per second. So with that said, the maximum FPS I got was 69, the average FPS was 60, the minimum was 51, the 1% low was 45, and the 0.1% low was 39. So actually not a bad showing from the Xulu XR1, considering this is an integrated GPU or an iGPU that's built into the 5800U. And I don't think the game looks very bad actually using the dynamic scaling feature. However, if you start going up to 900p or 1080p, things start to get a lot worse in terms of visual fidelity because of the dynamic scaling, and it's trying to target that 60 FPS. Moving on to the next game, that's going to be the very highly rated and a very fun game, you should really try it by the way, is BattleBit Remastered. We ran BattleBit Remastered at 1080p on the low preset, not the potato preset. We're not quite potato level with the integrated graphics. We also did a 127 versus 127 game benchmark. With that said, the results were the maximum FPS was 133, the average was 93, the minimum was 76. The 1% low was 64, and the 0.1% low was 40. We could actually probably get a little bit more FPS out of the Xulu XR1 if we chose the potato preset, but I figured having a little bit more higher quality textures would be a little bit better, kind of be able to see people better when playing the game. Moving on to CSGO, we ran CSGO at 1080p on the low preset. We are using the FPS Benchmark custom map that is available on the Steam Workshop. A lot of people use this map as a benchmarking tool, so we decided to do the same. The maximum FPS was 161 FPS, the average was 111, as well as the 1% low was 11, and the 0.1% low was 10. It mostly started to stumble on performance when it came to the smoke on the benchmarking test, and it didn't really seem to do that as much when playing in-game, but it's still there, and it is still a result nonetheless. Moving on to the next game, which is going to be Doom Eternal. We recorded a bunch of tests for Doom Eternal because I was really curious to see how Doom Eternal could handle on the built-in graphics of the 5800U. But we ran this test at 720p low preset with the FSR mod, which you can install to allow you to use FSR instead of DLSS on Doom Eternal, which netted us results of maximum FPS of 84, average of 64, minimum of 51, 1% low of 50, and the 0.1% low of 40. So not too bad with the 720p resolution, so let's bump it up to 900p. The next test was 900p with the same preset, as well as the FSR mod enabled on Doom Eternal. So we got a maximum of 60, an average of 49, a minimum of 42, a 1% low of 40, and a 0.1% low of 34. Not quite the 60 FPS that we wanted to get for our average FPS, but not too bad. Still very playable on 900p. So bumping it up to 1080p using the same low preset as well as the FSR mod, we got a maximum FPS of 46, an average of 38, a minimum of 33, a 1% low of 32, a 0.1% low of 25. So as you can see, we're starting to get into Nintendo Switch territories in terms of frames per second. Obviously, the 1080p resolution is much higher than the Nintendo Switch, as well as the FPS is maintaining a little bit higher than the Switch, but we're starting to get to that point with the performance on Doom Eternal. Another popular game that I figured I would try out is Minecraft. So Minecraft was running at 1080p using the default settings that come with Minecraft. This is the Java edition of Minecraft. With those settings, we got a maximum of 345 FPS, an average of 283, a minimum of 231, a 1% low of 93, and a 0.1% low of 63. Now, you could probably get a little bit better gaming experience on Minecraft using the Xulu XR1 if you installed something like Optifine, for example, because the FPS drops are quite dramatic, so having Optifine to help out and smooth those FPS numbers out would actually greatly help with the experience of Minecraft on the Xulu XR1. Next game up is going to be Overwatch 2 at 1080p using the low preset. We did 2 tests of Overwatch 2 with FSR 1.0 on and FSR off. I found that 1.0 worked better than the FSR 2 option for the frames per second. So with FSR 1.0 enabled, we got a maximum of 97, an average of 69, a minimum of 59, a 1% low of 41, and a 0.1% low of 33. With FSR off on Overwatch 2 using those exact same settings, we got a maximum of 114, an average of 77, a minimum of 57, a 1% low of 43, and a 0.1% low of 16. So as you can see, with FSR off, we got a little bit better performance out of Overwatch 2 from the Xulu XR1, but the 0.1% lows were worse. So I would rather enable FSR 1.0 and have that smoother frame rate and not have those jitteriness or frame rate hitches instead of having FSR off. So I would probably go with having FSR on. Next game up was Rocket League running at 1080p. We chose the lowest presets or the performance presets in the graphical menu. With these settings, we got a maximum of 119 FPS, an average of 89, a minimum of 71, a 1% low of 41, and a 0.1% low of 27. Last game up that we benchmarked is going to be Valorant. Valorant ran at 1080p on the lowest preset available, which got us results of a maximum FPS of 205, an average FPS of 154, and a minimum of 51, a 1% low of 47, and a 0.1% low of 41. So as you can see, Valorant was a very smooth experience and it ran quite well, actually. A lot better than I thought it was going to on the integrated graphics of the 5800U. You could probably bump up the preset to medium and still get a very playable frame rate above 120 frames per second. But if you want the fastest FPS performance possible out of the Xulu XR1, definitely go with the low preset. With those gaming benchmarks out of the way, what did you guys think of the little Xulu XR1? Me personally, I think it does quite decent, all things considered. Technically, there is a laptop APU inside of the Xulu XR1 that is previous generation Ryzen. It is not current generation Ryzen. Things took a little bit of tweaking, and FSR is going to be your best friend when it comes to the laptop APUs for anything, really, that don't have a dedicated graphics card. FSR is going to be your friend. For example, Doom Eternal, I had to install an FSR mod. Very simple, just drag and drop DLL files that you could just drag and drop into the games directory. And then it allows you to use the DLSS option menu on the Doom Eternal graphics settings menu to enable FSR instead of DLSS. And it works pretty good. It gave me about a 12 FPS bump. So I was pleasantly surprised with the gaming results, and let me know what you guys think. Next up, we'll be testing the sound quality of the 2 dual microphones on the front of the XR1. Right now, I'm about an arm's length away from the XR1, and right now I'm recording the audio that you're hearing right now on those 2 dual microphones using Audacity. I'm recording in Wave. We are also not filtering or post-processing this audio whatsoever, so this is a clear, accurate representation of what those microphones sound like when you are using them. The XR1 really is a neat piece of technology. It really is a powerful palm-sized computer that can fit in your hand, and it is travel-sized. You can take it on the go wherever you want. But there are a few things that do bug me about it that I would really love to see changed for the successor of the XR1, for the XR2, if it's going to be a thing. The number one thing that bothers me about the XR1 is the lack of Thunderbolt support. It would be so much better. I would be over the moon, and this would blow the doors wide open for the potential for the XR1 if it had an external dedicated GPU support via Thunderbolt. That would be amazing. It's got the CPU power under the hood to make this thing fantastic. Instead of going from a, I might buy it, I would go to an absolutely, I must have it if it had Thunderbolt and I could use a dedicated GPU. Another caveat that really bugged me about the XR1, it's on the back of the I/O. It's its layout of the I/O. If we look at the power plug and the Ethernet cable, you'll notice that those two are really close together. And the problem is I cannot remove the Ethernet cable if the Xulu XR1 is plugged in. You either A, have to rip off the retention clip of your Ethernet cable, which I don't recommend, or you have to unplug the XR1 in order to get the cable out. Like I said, I'm in the minority of people that do remove their Ethernet cables quite often, so a lot of people just plug it in and forget it. But I would really like to see this changed on the XR2 if there's going to be a successor to the XR1. Another thing about the power plug is I do not like pull power plugs. They break and they're very fragile and they're just ugly. They're also really difficult to cable manage, especially if they're at a 90-degree angle like the one we have here. A lot of people have USB-C power banks or blocks that are in their house because they have a cell phone. And this thing is rather power efficient. It can be probably powered off of a USB-C power block. Instead of having this ugly cable that's really fragile and will break, USB-C would just be so much better because it's so universal at this point that a lot of people would have a replacement cable if it broke. They would have a replacement block if it broke. This, you'd have to probably find one that supports the amperage, the wattage. You'd have to get one that's really specific for the XR1. So those are the things that I didn't really like about the XR1. So let me get into the things that I really did like about the XR1. For the XR1, I really like the build quality. It is nice. I like the anodized aluminum finish. The orange color is awesome with the black vents and the front panel being black. I really like the color combination. It has a lot of I/O for the size of the XR1. There's 7 USB ports on here. Tons of room for USB devices that you can use. I really dig the OLED display on the front. I think that's really cool. It is a really unique feature compared to a lot of other mini PCs that are out on the market. And it's just something that really sets Xulu apart from the other guys, as well as their travel case. Their travel case was actually really good. I really like the travel case. I move this thing around a ton. I travel with it a ton. I've gone through 2 different countries already using the Xulu XR1, and it is a really cool idea to have this guy as well as my portable monitor behind me when I'm traveling, because I can get some video editing done when I'm on the plane. There's not a whole lot of cableage that needs to be hooked up. You could have a USB wireless mouse and keyboard, and it's a really compact system, but it's also powerful at the same time. So to the people at Xulu, I want to say congratulations on being fully funded. I really like your XR1. I think it's got a lot of potential. You guys are on the right track. I'm going to enjoy the XR1 for the time being, and I know that some of my other family members will probably enjoy it as well. Make sure you guys check them out on Kickstarter. Just remember, this is a Kickstarter-backed project, and you're not guaranteed to get your Kickstarter reward if you back them. It's up to the company's obligation at that point in order to send you the Xulu XR1 that you are owed. So keep that in mind when you are thinking about buying the XR1. But that's it for me, guys. I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video. I know it's quite a marathon of a video, and I want to thank you guys so much for sticking with me for so long. My name is Ken, also known as Wiltshire, and as always, I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.